For the last couple months, TNA seemed to be finally figuring out what they had to do to deliver good pay-per-views. Did they make it 3 in a row at Destination X? Let's find out. For an opener, we got a fatal 4-way with Rubix, Mason Andrews, Lars Only, and Dakota Darso getting one more chance to get into the tournament. I would say this was good, but not great. When you do a match like this, you're not really expecting anything but car wreck style action, and there wasn't as much of that as you might think. There were some cool spots, but not a lot of them. And there were some lulls in the action. Maybe the chemistry was off between these guys, I'm not sure. I think part of the problem was that Rubix and Mason Andrews were obviously a cut above the other two. I mean, Lars Only I don't think was ready for this spot at all, and Dakota Darso just seems really miscast as an X Division guy.
This alleged superstar is an unworthy opponent.
I would have been fine with Rubix or Andrews winning. They both would have been fine choices in my opinion. Most people seem to want Rubix, and he was easily the most over, but from what I've seen, Mason Andrews had more to offer in the mic skills department, so I was rooting for him, and I was happy that he won. From there, we went right into Mason Andrews versus Kid Cash. Again, not incredible, but a good solid match that told a little more of a story than the opener. A lot of it was Cash playing this mean, brutal dirtbag to try to get Andrews over. That's the kind of stuff that Cash is really good at. And it seemed to work, at least partially. Overall, the crowd was more into Rubix, but they were rallying behind Andrews at one point here, so that was effective. Douglas Williams versus Kenny King. Now, to all of you people who thought Kenny King shouldn't have left ROH, did you see how over this guy was? The crowd was chanting his name before the match even started, and that's after just one appearance. This is because of a little thing called star quality, something his former employers didn't seem to think he had that much of, apparently, and they were wrong. Nice match. Not as explosive as King's match on Impact, though. I think the issue was that Douglas Williams has always been a bit of an awkward fit in the X Division. It worked when he was the champion who used the fact that he didn't wrestle traditional X Division style to get heel heat, but if he's not doing that gimmick, he just seems out of place. It looked like he'd gained some weight too, which was kind of disappointing. It almost felt like this went a little too long, honestly. Not a bad match by any means, but if they wanted a showcase for Kenny King, Douglas Williams probably wasn't the best choice of opponents. Sanjay Dutt versus Rashad Cameron. I'm not completely sold on Rashad Cameron yet. I thought he was a lot better here than he was on Impact, I'll give him that, but still, I'm on the fence with him. Although, I would say this was the best of the Ultimate X qualifiers, just because Sanjay has been crazy good since he came back. And the finish, dear lord, that moonsault stomp spot is jaw-dropping enough on its own, but he landed right on the man's junk. Oh my god! I hope Cameron wasn't planning on having kids. Jesus Christ, that had to suck. I sure hope Cameron got paid well for that match, because he must have been in a world of pain afterwards. Really cool to see Jesse Sorensen make an appearance. That was a nice feel-good moment. Good to see that he's on the mend, and he got a great reaction, even though he really hadn't been there that long before he got injured. Of course, he talks about Zema Ion. I guess that's going to be the big X Division rivalry next year, and it really should be, because there's a basis for a money feud right there. And if TNA don't screw this up, they could turn Sorensen into a big star with this angle. Next we had Zema Ion versus Flip Casanova. Really not much to say about this one. It was fine for a 3-minute match, but after Casanova broke Darso's nose last week, I think they just wanted to get him in and get him out. So Ion advances, that's all she wrote really. But, Zema? Breaking Jesse Sorensen's neck was one thing, but jacking Kaylee Ray's finishing move? You got some nerve, mister. Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle. I'm not going to say this was the best match these guys have ever had, but it was really, really good. Joe has been looking a lot more motivated lately. He even broke out the suicide dive, which he doesn't do that often these days. And I'll be damned, Samoa Joe is now at the top of the leaderboard in the Bound for Glory series. I never would have called that last year. Hell, no one would. Holy shit. Yes! And I think this is great. Before, there was an issue with James Storm winning the Bound for Glory series being too predictable, but this, and the winner of the main event, just threw a big monkey wrench into the whole thing. Well done on that. AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels, last man standing. You know, we've seen AJ and Daniels wrestle so many times now, there really isn't much that's interesting about it anymore, unless they're doing something different. Last man standing match. Okay, that's different. And sometimes that's enough to get people intrigued. I admit I still wasn't incredibly enticed by this, but it was a great, brutal match. Certainly the match of the night up to that point. The last few minutes were fantastic. I like that they didn't try going for the 10 count until the tail end of it, like when AJ actually told the referee not to count because he wasn't done beating on Daniels. That was a nice touch. And the finish was crazy. Styles clash off the stage through a table. Wow. Then we had the Ultimate X to crown the new X Division champion. First of all, big props to Sanjay Dutt for gutting it out with the shoulder injury. And to Mason Andrews. Dude worked 2 matches and an Ultimate X in one night. What a trooper that guy is. Now, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to mirror what I've heard a lot of people saying, in that this was probably the most disappointing match of the night. Not that it was bad, but we've just come to expect a lot from the Ultimate X, and I don't feel like this really lived up to it. I know there was an injury, Sanjay had to leave for a while to deal with his shoulder, and he was the only one with any real experience in this match, so that probably hurt it a lot. Now, we've seen much worse Ultimate X's, but this just wasn't everything I was hoping for, especially with the talent involved. Zema Ion winning felt like kind of a strange choice, just because Kenny King was the one with all the buzz. But I guess the writers are really committed to making Ion Sorensen a big thing, and yeah, I would not expect Ion to lose that title until Jesse comes back next year. And I do like Ion a lot. I'm not saying that's a bad way to go at all, but I wanted Kenny King to be the X Division champion, damn it! Oh well. We'll see what happens. Main event of the evening. Bobby Roode defending the World Heavyweight Championship against the greatest man that ever lived. It's possible that I might be building this up in my mind too much because I was just marking out like a maniac, but what a match, what a main event. Austin Aries is the TNA World Champion.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Even now, I have a hard time believing it. I do. But it really happened, and it was glorious. I've always been a big proponent of striking while the iron is hot. And there have been plenty of times in the past when TNA had the opportunity to do this, and they just didn't. You know, Samoa Joe, etc. But this time they cashed in exactly when they should have. I highly doubt this was the original plan, because it obviously throws a huge curveball at all the groundwork they laid with Roode and Storm for the last 9 months. But like I said last week, you couldn't derail Austin Aries right now. You just couldn't. The fans wanted it, and I think TNA just had to be flexible in this case. And I am kind of expecting Roode to win the title back before too long, but after all the shit he talked about the X Division and about how Aries got this shot, I think Aries kind of had to win the title here, and to validate himself, the X Division, and this new annual stipulation. If the first X Division champion who went for this didn't win the world title, people might not necessarily have bought into it again. And now the whole Bound for Glory series is up in the air. James Storm winning it isn't a foregone conclusion anymore. Even Storm vs. Roode at Bound for Glory is a question mark now. Maybe they'll rebook that feud for Genesis, or Lockdown. I don't know. I don't know. But I think I'm going to enjoy finding out. Destination X, thumbs up. Stay tuned for the iMPACT review. I'll be back in just a minute. So, while Viacom and DirecTV struggle to pull their heads out of their asses, I'm continuing to bring you the iMPACT review every single week, thanks to the magic of good old-fashioned cable television.
You're welcome.
Hey, I gotta fit him in somewhere. With this being the first show of Austin Aries' world title reign, I was really hoping the focus would be primarily on him. And we did get a pretty great segment with him and Roode, but it felt like mostly set up for stuff that's going to happen later, while the majority of the show was devoted to progressing other things. Like Bully Ray Joseph Park. They had their no DQ match this week. Pretty much the same match they had at Slammiversary, but with a little extra... Shut up! Stop everything! What are you doing? What the hell does it look like? I'm tweeting. And you have to do this while I'm recording the video? Yes. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. There. Now you can talk. They're showing how Joseph is slowly starting to transition from character to wrestler, so his hope spots were a bit more impressive this time. It got a little more brutal with the hardcore stuff, the kendo stick, the cheese grater to the testicles, that one never gets old. Of course, they brought back the thumbtacks, which I was completely sick of, but by now I think enough time had passed where you could do a thumbtack spot and not just have people kind of roll their eyes at it. Plus, it's not Abyss doing it this time. And seeing Joseph Park pulling a thumbtack chokeslam out of nowhere and then marveling at what he'd just done, that was pretty cool. And that's what sold this match for me. Like with the Slammiversary match, the character performances are what made it work. Bully Ray being his normal awesome self, but being shocked when Joseph pulled out a hope spot, and Joseph also being completely stunned every time this happened. Especially the post-match stuff, where he sees his own blood, and then he hulks up and hits the black hole slam. Great acting there. But this, and Bully Ray's interview afterward, was the first tease that they might be going the split personality route with this angle. I hope that's not the case. That would just be too hokey for me. You know, they tried it with the Black Rain character back in the day, and it was completely idiotic. Granted, this has been set up way better than that ever was, but I'm just really hoping they won't go down that road again. We had 2 more matches in the Bound for Glory series. We got Anderson vs. Angle, which was very good, albeit a little formulaic, and that was the main event. But the more interesting match, I thought, was Samoa Joe versus Bob Van Damme. Not necessarily a better match, but I liked this just because we're now starting to see the mini-stories within the larger tournament come into focus. With Samoa Joe, it's his determination to win by submission. You know, they got over that he probably could have pinned the guy, but instead he kept trying to win with a submission until Van Damme surprised him with a small package. You know, Joe took the lead on points by scoring all these submission victories, but now he's so focused on tapping out his opponents that it almost becomes a weakness, and Van Damme ends up exploiting it. And I'm actually okay with Van Damme winning this. 1, because it teased a Joe heel turn, and 2, because they had to start doling out the points in the tournament more equally, otherwise they were just going to have a couple people way out in front, and that's not as interesting. You know, it's more compelling if there's a whole bunch of people vying for those top 4 spots, and if they can incorporate all these different mini-stories into this, all the better. Take Magnus, for example. He's got a nice little story in this thing that you saw hints of in his backstage promo, where he's thinking strategically and outsmarting opponents that people otherwise might not think he'd be able to beat. And it's been working for him. You know, he talked about how he's won all his tournament matches so far with superior strategy, making Magnus, I think, kind of a surprising dark horse in the BFG series. I don't think anyone expects him to win, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the Final 4, which would be awesome. You know, he wouldn't even have to win, really. I mean, just being in the tournament and doing well in it could really do a lot for a guy like Magnus. So we got Zema Ion's first match as the X Division champion. It was pretty short, just something to put him over and make him look strong. Unfortunately, it was against Dakota Darso.
Yet again, I am standing before another ignoramus.
Really? Out of all the X Division guys you tried out recently, you decide to use Darso? Granted, Ion squashing Darso is better than Ion squashing Kenny King, but I'm really hoping the only reason this happened is because Darso and Jesse Sorensen are friends. I mean, you have Ion destroy him and it adds more fuel to that fire, but at the same time, Sorensen is still in a neck brace. He's not going to be back anytime soon. I mean, that probably won't be until well into next year. Are they going to be able to sustain this for that long? I don't know. And I like Ion. I do. But if they're committed to this thing with him and Sorensen, that means it may be quite a while before they pull the trigger on Kenny King. And that sucks. Hopefully they'll do something else with him in the meantime. And as for Darso, we've seen him multiple times now, and he's been largely unimpressive in every appearance. There's no reason to sign this guy. Let this be the last we see of him. Brooke Tessmacher and Gail Kim had their rematch for the Knockouts title. Really nothing to bitch about here. Now, I still think their sacrifice match was probably the best one they've had, but I do think this was better than their Slammiversary match. Really nice women's bout. Tessmacher wins clean, and since it happened on the TV show, I expect this will probably be Gail's exit from the singles title picture for the time being, which I think is a good idea. You know, it's time to roll with someone new at the top for a while. Not really sure where they'll go next with Tessmacher, though. You know, I'm guessing Mickie James will be her next opponent and then finally turn heel. And I think a heel Mickie again after all this time would be pretty cool. So, yeah, we'll see. Unsurprisingly, the best segment of the night was the Austin Aries segment. He cuts his first promo as the world champion. Again, not a lot of story progression here. This was really just about TNA saying, here's your new world champion, soak it in. And the crowd did just that. They were eating up everything Aries did. He put over the title, he put over the company. He even mentioned that he got congratulations from CM Punk. He didn't mention Punk by name or anything, but that was awesome that he threw that out there. And yeah, he did sound kind of full of himself as he was doing this, but it's Austin Aries. That's part of his charm. So Bobby Roode comes out, and this is where it got really good. Roode is so livid, so irate, so spitting mad at having lost his title that he can't even form coherent sentences. He can barely speak. And I've seen two reactions to this, one being that Roode was awesome in this segment, the other being that he was absolutely terrible. As far as I'm concerned, it was the former, 100%. This is how a champion should behave after he loses the title. He should be upset. The championship meant so much to him that he can't even function without it. That kind of reaction makes the title look like the most important thing in a company. Roode killed it in this segment. And to all you people who think he was awful, let me remind you that if this had been John Cena, he would have just grinned, cracked some terrible jokes, and completely no-sold the whole thing, demeaning the title and demeaning the guy who beat him for it. Isn't this better? Roode showing that Aries got under his skin so much made Aries look like an even bigger star. The way Cena reacts to this type of stuff does the exact opposite.
You're nothing but a selfish prick!
Now, of course, the final segment of the night was devoted to the returning Sting. Didn't care for that. But they had a couple segments with him and Hogan talking about this Aces and Eights thing, and despite the fact that they've really only made one appearance so far, Sting thinks the two of them need to go old school to deal with this group. Presumably meaning that him and Hogan should get back in the ring and handle this personally, to which I can only say, please don't. Please, just don't.
Destination? Horror.
So Sting comes out to confront these guys. They lay out Hogan in the back, and when Sting goes to check on Hogan, they jump him from behind. And now there's like 7 or 8 of the Aces and Eights. And even though Hogan and Sting had no trouble dispatching the entire Immortal faction by themselves at Bound for Glory last year, we're supposed to believe that this might be more than they can handle all of a sudden. This segment really felt like it was dragging. After the second time Hogan didn't come out, obviously something was wrong, but Sting is just standing there waiting for something to happen, waiting for them to play Hogan's music again and again. That part got pretty dull, but the beating on Sting was cool. Way better than that first one a couple of weeks ago. And this angle is sort of interesting. I just hope and pray that it does not lead to the return of Jeff Jarrett. Although at this point, I'm kind of thinking that it will. Ha-ha! Really not looking forward to that. That's all I've got to say. You're stalling. Fuck you, I'm not stalling. I was going to get to the Claire Lynch thing. I just wanted to cover everything else first, so I could build up to it. Yeah, that's why I hadn't mentioned it yet.
Oh my God, he's gonna puke! He's gonna puke! He's gonna puke!
So Daniels and Kaz are talking to Claire Lynch. Before it can really go anywhere, AJ comes out, and then Claire reveals that what Daniels said was actually true. That AJ Styles is indeed the father of her bastard child. I've long since passed the point where I could take this angle seriously. It's just getting more and more absurd. And with the exception of Daniels, all the talents involved keep trying to sell this as something serious and dramatic. But when the live audience is chanting, Jerry, 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 that really doesn't work. It's becoming so laughably bad now. And the craziest stuff was what happened afterward. All of a sudden, Claire Lynch is insisting that AJ do the right thing, probably indicating that she's going to turn heel at some point. And when AJ is asked about this, he admits that he doesn't know if he's the father. He doesn't know. So, even if he's not the father, the fact that he doesn't know means that he slept with this chick. So at the very least, AJ Styles is an adulterer.
Oh, what a bunch of bull...
I really don't like where this is going. I joked about the Maury Povich thing, but honestly, I think that's where this is all headed now. What, is the next ludicrous plot twist going to be that Claire Lynch was in league with Daniels and Kaz the whole time? Did they conspire to somehow get AJ to knock her up? Did she slip some roofies into his drink and then have her way with him while he was unconscious, just so they could ruin his reputation on Impact? None of that would surprise me at this point. Good show otherwise, but man, I can't even wrap my brain around this Claire Lynch thing anymore.
I will not participate in this charade this evening.
I could have done with a little more Austin Aries, but minus the Claire Lynch train wreck, this was a fine show. That debacle notwithstanding, Impact is so much better than Raw right now, you guys. It's so much better. And now they're doing this rewind show that starts an hour before Impact. That was disappointing, honestly. There's no new content. It's really just a bare-bones recap show. You know, it's helpful if you missed Impact the previous week, but unless you did, there's really no reason to watch it. And that's all I got this week. See you next time, where hopefully Claire Lynch will take the week off. Later.